for the session is, how will the extra measures needed for increased local healthcare, water systems, transportation, and policing be funded? Will my taxes be going up for a project that will reduce the value of my home? I'll turn that question over to the panel.
Hi, sorry about that, Daniel. I couldn't unmute, so maybe in the future if you can help the panel unmute so we can answer those questions. So I'll start in terms of answering the question, and then I'll allow maybe my partners to step in. In terms of looking at utilities, looking at transportation, in terms of roads and the impact that it'll have. We absolutely want to work with the community to ensure that there's no fiscal impact. We do not want to create any burden fiscally onto the local taxpayers. And we work very hard, and you can look to probably the most recent project that we've done is we did a regional intermittent center in London, where we work with the community to make sure that the servicing was there, the local authority, that the servicing was there, that wastewater and the fluent. We worked to ensure that we upgraded that and so that there was no impact, and then obviously no costs as well. So absolutely, we're bringing this to the community, and we don't want it to have any fiscal impact with respect to roads or servicing or utilities to the local. We want to be able to bear as much of that as ourselves and ensure that that we're not straining the local system.
Okay, thank you. I just want to remind those of you that are on the phone to press *9 to raise your hand if you have a question. So our next question, was a formal site review done? And if so, when will that be made available to the public?
Thank you for that question. In terms of a formal site review, during the site selection portion of this presentation, we talked about the reasons why we selected that site, and those are truly the reasons why, and the only reasons why that we selected that site. And so really there's no much more to add in terms of why we select that site, but truly we wanted a site that we can start construction that was close to the 416, that met our staffing needs in terms of where they were living, and they live in your community and those surrounding communities, and we wanted to make sure that obviously that site could fit our facility and did not incur increased costs with getting into bidding wars with the private sector in terms of securing a site. So really truly those were the reasons why we selected those sites, the site.
Thank you. Next question that we got is, will the prison be serviced by a private well and septic system, or will it be serviced by municipal services which would be extended to the site?
Yeah, thank you. What we're going to ensure to do is obviously that within the site, we're going to make sure that whatever we build in terms of servicing and utilities, that it is able to be serviced. Now, when we take it from our property to the municipal property, we work collaboratively with the municipality to ensure that if the municipality needs to increase their servicing or their utility capacity, that we actually help in paying for that, so that it's not a burden on the municipality or the local taxpayers.
So another question that we have is, people moved to Kemptville to get away from the city. We do not have the infrastructure in place to support such a large facility in terms of water, sewer, and roads. So that's a comment. If someone would like to address that comment, please.
Thank you for that. Thank you again for the servicing question. I think, as I said before, what we try to do is not impact, obviously, the municipality with respect to servicing your utilities. So we do not want, your taxpayer dollars to go up or your utility dollars to go up. So we want to make sure that we're bearing the cost ourselves. I understand we're bringing this to you, and we do not want this to be an extra burden on you in terms of financial. And so we will work hard to make sure that there's no financial impact to the community, and in inverse, actually, hopefully an economic impact in a positive way to the community versus having to pay for bringing our facility, because we are bringing it to you. We understand that it might be a burden to you, and we do not want that to be that burden from a fiscal perspective. And in terms of what we talked about, roads, we also work very closely, obviously, with the local authorities. We've done this in Windsor. We've done this in other assets that we've built across Solgen writ large. And we do undertake traffic studies. We make sure that we work with Ministry of Transportation and the local authorities to see what the impact of those traffic studies are, and look to create potentially ancillary roads or accesses, so that we ensure that the local traffic is not impeded by any of our traffic.
Thank you. We'll do one more question by chat, and then we'll move to some live questions. So why were there no consultations with the municipality prior to the announcement?
As we alluded to before, we usually do not disclose the location of any buildings that we undertake. We do not want, any of that commercial sensitive information to get out, so that people can preempt the buying of lands or the selling of lands, or the development of adjacent lands being impacted. And so we do not, unfortunately, we do not go forward with that disclosure because of that commercial sensitivity. As well, our assets are an essential service. Unfortunately, we do have to build somewhere these assets, but they are essential. And so that's why, again, we don't necessarily go out and do a public consultation of where we're going to build, because these are essential assets and we do have to build them.
Hi, guys. So regarding the local and economic benefits, it's been mentioned often during this presentation and pointed out in the slides that this will generate new jobs and have economic benefits. The economic benefits shown in the presentation quote substantial amounts of money being brought into the communities via purchases at local businesses, restaurants, and office space. Example of $7 million per year in additional spending in the city of Oshawa. Now, Oshawa has a population of almost 400,000 people. So that's about 100 times the population of Kemptville. Therefore, as the numbers quoted aren't really relevant to our small town, I'm left to wonder what the true local and economic benefits will be, as the ones quoted truly don't reflect our small town. Do you have a comparable town where the comparable prison has been built that is reflective of Kemptville to give us numbers that are more relative? And lastly, out of all of the employees and jobs that will work at the proposed new prison in Kemptville, what percentage of those positions will be filled by transfers? Thank you.
Hey, thank you for that question. I believe the question also talked about bright lights and the impact of that facility and people moving in to enjoy the where they live and the wildlife and escape from the city lights. As you saw from the picture that we showed, we really try to keep a low profile of whatever we built, and we try to integrate it within the landscape. We are going to work with the community to ensure that there's appropriate setbacks, that there's the appropriate landscaping as well to really buffer that. And in terms of lights, we do not have offensive lights that are on 24/7 that people will feel that are light pollution of the sky. The best example I can use is Southwest Detention Center. We have several neighbors. Well, one neighbor that's actually a female neighbor who has a house, and her property line abuts ours. And we worked very closely with her in terms of how we located the facility on our property, the landscaping that we used to ensure that we provided the right sight line and the right buffer. And in terms of lighting was very, very minimal. And we have had no complaints with her after building it and after being in operation for several years now, because we respected that she is our neighbor and that she bought that house, and that we didn't want to impede her livelihood of her being able to enjoy that house. So again, we're going to try to do the same thing here in terms of keeping a low profile, and so that we don't pollute the air in terms of lighting or otherwise. Now, in terms of the reflection against Oshawa and the economic big impact, you're absolutely right. The numbers are different and the community size is different. When we talk about local community impacts, hopefully, we do see an impact locally in terms of, the staff that we're bringing, in terms of, buying locally. But in terms of the economic impact during construction and the construction workers and potentially other services, we're really talking about Kemptville and also the surrounding areas as well. So the economic impact, what we're trying to bring is obviously to Kemptville and surrounding areas of Kemptville. In terms of the staffing, that part of the question and how many staff will come, I'll turn it over to Karen Ellis, the ADM. Likely we don't have that number off the top of our head, and she's on mute, so maybe I'll answer the question. And and in terms of how many staff are going to come from the current facility and how many new staff, we're still working that out. We're very early in the process. We just announced we have the union who we have to engage with to see how that works out. But as I said, this engagement is going to be iterative. We are happy to answer those questions once we actually have those answers. And we first need to work with the union to figure out what those answers are. And then we are happy to provide them to you.
Yeah. I did finally manage to unmute. Thank you. We are having some trouble with that. So yes, Ali has covered most of what I was going to say, but it obviously we've got kind of a 7-year horizon here in terms of the length of sort of the design and the building of the actual facility. And we will work with our union, and there will likely be a mix, as we've said. We're going to keep the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre going strong and viable. In fact, we have a 99-year lease for that facility. And as I said, it's going to have a new focus as we are able to modernize there in terms of the programming and housing of some of the population in the region. And then this facility would have a different size, the 220 or so beds that I mentioned. And we will have to work this out in terms of how many might be transferred and how many might be new. And that's going to take us some time. And we have lots of time to figure that out and talk to you about that when it becomes more closer to the time to actually act on it. Thanks.
Thank you for taking my online call. When I first found out about the project, I had an open mind as I saw that there could be benefits to the community with a low impact facility. But my wife and I, we moved to Kemptville 2 years ago to retire into a quiet rural community. And now I find out I'm your next door neighbor. So I'm looking at 3 to 4 years of construction into my retirement period to start with, followed by the infrastructure upgrades that'll go along with that. I'm not exactly totally happy with your choice of selection of all of the places in the area in which you could have put this facility. Also bordering our common line is the recreational trail that runs between us, which is one of the nice features of the Kemptville area. And I'm wondering what you're going to do to address that. I have heard your pitch today and see that you are proposing what looks like a first-rate facility. In my experience, I believe that once the facility is up and running, the community will have very little interaction with it on a day-to-day basis. But the period until that time arrives is going to be quite chaotic. My experience with facilities of this sort comes from Saint Jerome, Quebec, where the facility there is built right next to the highway as well. The sight lines from the highway to the facility have been kept open for security reasons that are quite obvious. The area is known for its prison because of that, and Kemptville doesn't have a feature that we're known for, but everybody driving down the 416 now is going to know Kemptville as the prison place, not as like Merrickville, a Rideau Canal recreational facility. Okay, you have made the point tonight that there are many public institutions which are functioning next door to this type of facility, but you have not stated that there are any residential units or housing developments which have been constructed near this type of facility. So I end my time there, and I thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you for those comments, and I thank you for your candor and the way you presented them. I truly do appreciate them. So thank you for that. I'll try to address your comments in several parts. Number one is we understand that Kemptville is a small community, and we do not want, as I said, light pollution or noise pollution. during construction. And so what we will do is we'll work with the local authorities to develop a construction plan that, really focuses during the prime hours of work hours to ensure that that's when construction will be taken. We'll look to ensure that, if there needs to be a service road so that the trucks, as you mentioned, are not going up and down any major street, that they're going in, through potentially a back road or a service road, so that, you don't hear them, or you don't see them. And in terms of, the actual path that you talked about, we want to preserve that path as much as possible. We want to work with you to set back this facility as much as possible, to have as many buffers as a visual as well. So whether if it's, having burn lines or tree lines. And so we want to enhance that path. We want to make sure that that path as a visual, is not impeded by this facility. So we will work with you in great lengths to make sure that that path is preserved and that visual is not there. So when you're enjoying the nature, that you see more greenery, not a piece of construction during construction or the asset post construction. So we will work hard with you to ensure that. And in terms of the examples that you spoke about people building, two examples in Niagara as well as in our Ontario Correctional Institute in Brampton. Both of those examples, what we see is the municipality coming to us, as developers coming to us and buying land, and actually now they're building residential and abutting to us, and it's actually increasing the land value. Those property lines that they're building now, or that they will be building once those lands are rezoned, will actually have residential that comes and abuts our property. So even now, currently, we see in two examples that we are not seeing a hindrance or a huge fallout of property values in terms of developers or the municipalities building right beside our property lines.
As correctional facilities are exempt under the MTAA, what assurances can you give that the municipality will not be bearing the burden of funding services and ongoing infrastructure needs?
Thank you for that. As I said before, we ensure that any servicing utility needs or any road needs that we bear the cost of those needs, and we will work with the local authorities to make sure that any upgrades that are needed, that we pay for the portion of our upgrade that's needed as well. We do pay a per head per diem as well in terms of municipal taxes, quote unquote. So we do pay back in to the provincial and municipal in terms of that per diem per head. But what we try to do is have zero impact in terms of the municipality in terms of cost, and we work closely with the local authorities to ensure that.
Thank you, Ali. So the next question is, what is the expected length of stay of an inmate? Will people be serving long sentences at this facility?
Because I was able to unmute quickly, maybe Karen, I'll take this answer and hand it over to you or Karen afterwards. The average length of stay is actually very short. It can range from a month or 2 months as the average range of stay here. So we don't have people that are staying here for very long. And that is why it's really meant for minimum to medium security individuals. And that's why in terms of a facility, we're trying to build something that's rehabilitative, because once they come into our facility, they're trying to leave in a month or two. And we want to, make sure that while they're there, they're being rehabilitated. And as some of my colleagues said, once they leave, they get reintegrated back into their facilities. So these people are not quote unquote lifers in these facilities. I think the average is between 30 and 60 days of how long they will stay with us. Karen, maybe if we can unmute her.
That's great, Ali. And I would also add that the longest sentence that someone is sentenced to 2 years less a day. That's the length of stay within a provincial institution. Anything longer than that, and the person who's been sentenced to that longer time goes and serves that time in a federal correctional institution. Thanks.
Following up on that question related to the type of individual clients that will be found, will sex offenders figure among the inmates staying at the facility?
Maybe if I can unmute Karen or Lisa to answer that question.
Thank you. Lisa, I'd also
I'm on AVMLS if you want.
Like you to ask one as well. Thank you. All right, it says my connection is unstable. Lisa, maybe you could just step in right now. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, thank you for that question. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the question was, will sex offenders be possibly sentenced to this facility? The answer is yes. We don't, there isn't a differentiation between what people are sentenced to. There are different classifications within an institution in regards to where inmates are housed or classified within the facility. But as far as actual charges go, doesn't have an impact on whether they go to one facility or another. So this facility, like all of our other ones, will have separate areas for offenders that are in for certain crimes and other units for offenders who are in for other crimes, mixing together so that they are in a safe population. I hope that answers your question.
So the following question is, what will be done about the assumingly very bright lights that will surround the facility? People who move to this part of the town do so to live in the country. So if you could address that question, please.
Yeah, thank you. As we said, in terms of bright lights and the example that we have in Windsor and many other examples actually that we have where the community is really abutting our property, we ensure that definitely after the core hours that there isn't anything that really can pollute the light or pollute the noise that's around them. We understand that you want to enjoy your surroundings, you want to enjoy the home that you've built. And honestly, the best example that we have is Windsor, but also we have examples in North Bay and other places where we're truly abutting and we don't see that and we don't see complaints. Now, if for some reason post-construction or even during construction we see that we are troubling you in a certain way, absolutely we will get together and talk about it and do whatever we can to try to mitigate any of that impact. We're not here to come and have a very closed dialogue or have a closed, impact you in a way that truly hurts your livelihood and you trying to enjoy your home. So we're open to working with you. We're open to bending and trying to do whatever we can during construction, but post-construction as well.
Following question is, will the province be renovating the KDH hospital? Reception intake is approximately 10 feet by 15 feet, which includes triage, reception, and registration. If not, will a separate entrance be added? Acute care, test, x-rays, etc. will be a reality.
Maybe I can start here while we unmute Karen or Melly Mayo or Mena as well, who are my colleagues. In terms of the hospital, we are going to have a follow-up engagement with the hospital authorities and with our clinicians to really discuss any potential impacts on the hospital. As you saw from one of the slides that we showed, we are trying to create our own infirmary where we can be self-sustainable from a healthcare perspective so that we are not impacting any local healthcare needs. And in terms of any major healthcare needs that we might have, ones that we can't manage inside our infirmary, we will look not necessarily to go to Kemptville, but to go to other hospitals within Ottawa. And that's why that adjacency to the 416 is very, very important to us. But as a part of our engagements, of our follow-up engagements, we are going to be meeting with the health authorities to really go from a clinical perspective through what we do and what we're trying to build, and really have that dialogue with them of any impacts. We do not want to create any impact to the healthcare system. We understand that the Kemptville Hospital, is a smaller hospital, so we're going to work closely with them to ensure that there's very little or no impact to them, and that we are obviously dispersing any kind of impact to not just that hospital, but the current hospitals we go to now as well for any major needs that we have. So I don't know, Mena or Melanie or Karen, if you want to jump in to add anything more.
Thanks, Ali. I was just going to say that, of course, as I had mentioned a bit earlier, if there were an exceptional emergency, that person, if it did need to go to the Kemptville Hospital, that person would be very securely escorted, the issue dealt with, and then brought back to the institution as soon as that's possible. But as Ali said, we're going to be open and look at, what will work and what will not overload the local capacity there. But I really do want to underscore that those are the exceptional cases, and that we really have a very strong focus on doing really, really good healthcare inside the institution, as we showed you with some of those photos, and we've got that professional medical capacity in-house. Thank you.
So do you find that criminal activity in the immediate or surrounding area of the detention center has increased or show signs of increasing within any community that has a detention center? Will additional OPP presence be required? If so, will our taxes increase to cover this, or will the province cover this cost?
Well, I think Lisa would be well placed to answer the first part of that question for sure. Lisa, if you could please talk to that one, thanks.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. There has historically been no indication from both our municipal and our provincial police forces, who we establish great relationships with wherever we do have institutions built. But no indication in any of our 25 institutions or the areas that they're built in that crime has either gone up into the in that area, and B, as I said earlier, and some of my colleagues did, when an inmate gets released from custody, they want to get back to their home community. So that's why we take measures to ensure with their discharge planning that we either get them back there prior to discharge or upon their discharge. But historically, no, to answer your question, there have been no historical or recent indications that crime or inmates released have changed their living arrangements based on staying in the town or city where the institution is. I hope that answers your question.
So one of the areas of study that has been neglected is road infrastructure. There are only 2 arteries from the north of Kemptville to Prescott Street, and 1 from the south, which are bumper most of the time. Will there be a designated road? I do not support the project. Having existing land does not dictate an ideal location.
Thank you for that question. What we undertake as a part of all of our major infrastructure projects with Infrastructure Ontario and the local authorities is we do undertake a traffic study that's done, because we want to make sure that we have that empirical evidence. And I understand your concern. And so what we'll do is make sure that we undertake that traffic study. That traffic study will then inform us to work with local authorities, Ministry of Transportation as well, on how we cannot impact that traffic. That's local. And so, we'll work with them to undertake maybe, building service roads or different accesses so that those arteries are not impacted. And, we have done this before in other projects that we've done, whether if it's regional command centers or OPP detachments, where we work to ensure that the in and out of our frontline services do not impact that local traffic.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to a couple of live questions now. So
I realized that Kemptville, and this facility was originally claimed to be an Ottawa. They called it Ottawa, not Eastern Ontario. I wonder if the fact that Kemptville is so close to Ottawa has is a large reason for them picking Kemptville and not, for instance, Cornwall or Hawkesbury. Also, we are a very, very small town. I believe there's about 4,000 people here. It's never, I'd like you to pick another town jail of this size, this projected size, of that size, a small town, and tell me where it is, and I would like to look into it further. So my question really is, the reason for building the jail here is because you thought Kemptville was part of Ottawa. Am I correct in assuming that? And therefore, will most of the facilities available in Ottawa be used for this jail? So in other words, we're just really being used as a home for the building, and there won't be many jobs, and most people will get on the 416 and go home to Ottawa or Brockville, both of which have jails and probably have people have experience of working in the prisons and will be given jobs there.
Thank you for that. We do not think, obviously, Kemptville is Ottawa. When we looked at the site, our site selection, we looked at available lands that were owned by the government, so that we don't have to pay an exorbitant price. We also looked for lands that were adjacent to the 416, and we wanted lands that weren't going to take us, an hour away or an hour and a half away from driving into Ottawa. In terms of jobs and who lives near, we have a lot of staff that actually live in the area of Kemptville and outside of Kemptville. We do have a heat map that we did a heat map that shows they are ingrained within Kemptville and those surrounding areas. So they live, our staff are actually living within those communities, Kemptville and surrounding areas right now. And we feel that some of the staff that are probably more eastern, that will be transferred to the facility, will probably like to maybe move more westward and closer to Kemptville potentially as well. In terms of a facility that maybe you can look at, now we have smaller facilities like this one in other areas, Windsor, we have smaller facilities in Sudbury and North Bay, but one that would probably bring maybe an example for you is the facility that we have in Lindsay. That is the Central East Correctional Center. That actually has over 1,000 beds. And the community, the Lindsay community that it surrounds, I think have about 15 to 20,000 people. So obviously not as small as Kemptville, but not exorbitant. It's not 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 people that live in that community. I think it's about 15 to 20,000. And so, you can definitely speak to that community in terms of the impact. We know the local police force there. We work very closely with the local police force. They're embedded with us. And, we do not see any local, major local impact in terms of crime or anything else within that facility. So, those surrounding areas. So probably that is a good example. But again, Sudbury is a good example. North Bay is a good example. Brockville, obviously, in St. Lawrence Valley as well, and even Windsor. So I think Karen wants to add to this answer as well. So if we can unmute her, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I also wanted to add, I was actually down visiting our team and walking around the facility that Ali just mentioned, the Central East Correctional Institute, maybe a week and a half ago. And I also just wanted to point out that in that community near Lindsay, Ontario, there's in the range of 200 to 300 volunteers from the surrounding area who do come in to do work in that facility in a very positive way. So I just wanted to point out that there is that whole aspect that can be a very positive thing in the surrounding area around our institutions. Thank you. They do programming and support. Thanks.
Hi, how's everyone? I just wanted to ask a couple things. I've been listening to the whole thing, and they keep saying a portion of things will not come on us. A portion of things will not be added to our taxes. They will do as much as they can not to add to our prices. But it's saying it's portion. There's no guarantee that our taxes aren't going to go up, that we're not going to have to pay for this. And, shouldn't this be completely 100% not coming out of a very, very small community that you keep hearing? Like you're talking about Brockville and other ones. We are the smallest community that I've heard of that's going to get a prison. And from what I understand, where there is over 75% of our community that do not want this here. It is too close to schools. It's too close to the elderly. It's too close to the hospital. And we don't want it here. Is there any way we can say, no, it should not be here? Can we do this? Because I'm not hearing any guarantees of things being any guarantees of prices going up, housing going down, and people who just moved here 2 years ago are saying, we moved here because it was a great community and it was a place to retire, and now they're going to have this right beside them. I just don't feel that we were given a chance to say no, and why is one of the smallest communities being considered? Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the authenticity in your voice, and I appreciate that question. I'll try to be a little more definitive if I can. we work to ensure that there's no tax impacts for you locally, and we will ensure that we spend our money so that there is no local tax impacts. From previous projects that we've done, we have seen the same. Obviously, I can't say 100%, but in all the previous projects that we've done, we haven't brought local taxes up, because we do try to pay for those site servicing all ourselves, the utilities all ourselves. So from the examples that we have, definitely I can be definitive of those that we do not raise the taxes. In terms of schools, I understand, I have a young daughter, and I understand that if I didn't work in corrections, and if I didn't know corrections and what we are trying to do, what we do and what we are trying to do in the future with the transformation of what we're trying to build here, which is really that low profile, kind of security that on the outside looks like a normal facility. I would understand where and I do understand actually where you're coming from. But because I've been working in corrections, that I know corrections and the work that we're doing, and with respect to other locations that we have too, that Rob Green, our Director of Infrastructure, went through, we have many facilities that are within a 1 kilometer radius of multiple schools, and we do not have major issues with the schools, with the children in those schools. The people that we are housing, again, only are staying between 30 and 60 days with us, and they want to go back to their homes and their families as well, and they want to go back to their communities. And we have, as one of my colleagues said, 99% of the people we make sure that go back to those communities. So they do not want to stay within your small community or impact your small community. With respect to talking to the school boards, we want to have an open dialogue with them. We want to, start engaging with them very early within the next few weeks or month, to have more focused dialogue with them to ensure that we're hearing their concerns more acutely, and start working with them to see, what we can do in terms of impacts and how we can continue with this dialogue. And I think, Lisa, I don't know if there's any other school boards that we work with locally that are within, that 1 kilometer radius for our other facilities that you can comment on.
Thanks, Ali. Because I'm from the Western region, offhand, I will speak to the Southwest Detention Center, as you mentioned earlier, it being our newest facility in the province, and again in the region that I do come from. In addition to the local community that Ali mentioned earlier with the soccer fields, et cetera. The local community, although there was, this type of engagement sessions then as well, and some questions very similar to the ones that you folks are posing tonight. At the end of the day, the same thing. There are engagements with the local community and the local school boards. Like you said, Ali, the gym is open. They do have tournaments in there. They do have local basketball teams and volleyball teams, et cetera, coming in, volunteering as ADM Ellis had mentioned. So I reiterate what you said, Ali, that I understand everybody's concerns and what they're saying, but there have been incidents, especially with our newer facilities and the way that they are built, and in the communities, that there have been those positive relationships. There are.
So I wanted to come back to the question of why the municipality wasn't consulted. The most recent answer was because you didn't want to disclose in order to not excite or trigger commercial interests and avoid bidding war, and that it's an essential service. So my comment would be, yes, it may be an essential service, but it doesn't mean that it's essential that it be in Kemptville. The other comment is that you didn't want to trigger commercial interest, but you own the land. So there wouldn't have been any commercial bidding or any problems in communicating to the municipality well ahead of time what your plans would have been, since you own the land. And there were other plans for that land that the municipality and others were entertaining, and I think they were in touch with our MPP and probably through the government, so you would have been aware of those. So I'd ask you to comment on that. The other is, if you intend to demolish the existing buildings on the property, are we not losing assets right off the bat? So we're starting off with a negative position, since we will have lost assets that have a certain market value. That's it.
Not just with this facility, but with any other facility, whether it's correctional or any of our OPP facilities, regional command centers, operational centers that we have. We never disclose the location before we announce. And in terms of, to your question about, will you bought and you driving up the commercial value or any of that, we just don't want anyone getting involved when we're choosing a site in terms of, maybe they want to sell or maybe they want to buy. And so we don't want to make that disclosure. And then have any of that commercial activity happening, because it is sensitive commercial information that we are trying to preserve. In terms of maybe, I'll ask Angelo Gismondi to talk about maybe your second question, if we can unmute him.
Having trouble here unmuting.
Oh, we hear you, Angelo.
And I'm sorry, I was trying to get myself unmuted. Please repeat the question for me.
The second part of the question was that if you intend to demolish the existing buildings on the proposed site, are we not losing assets right off the bat? And those assets have a certain value. So you say that you don't want to, pass on some costs or difficulties to the municipality. But if we lose those assets, aren't we starting right off the bat in a negative position?
My understanding is that those assets are not being used, and they haven't been used for some time, and they're not functional anymore. So that was one of the reasons why we chose this site as well.
Yes. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Okay. I want to start by thanking you for taking live questions. I think it adds a lot of value and respect to tonight's session. I also want to let the panel know that for over a decade, I've worked for the Correctional Service Canada and our federal institutions and around. One, I wanted to give one statement and ask one question. So, something that was mentioned earlier, and for anyone who's still listening, there was a slide or two about rehabilitation and programming, and I'm glad that the question was asked of how long do inmates stay in provincial institutions, and the answer was 1 to 2 months. So just for anyone still listening, there's no meaningful rehabilitation or programming given to these inmates. So that's an opinion of mine that I wanted to share. And then my question for the group is, my concern with the location of this jail is that it's across the street from schools. Now, it's mentioned over and over again that this site was chosen because it's close to the 416 and it's close to the workers that are going to be in the jail, the guards, the CXs, whatnot, who are going to be working at the jail. So it's convenient for getting offenders to and from jail and getting people who work at the jail to and from the jail. I want to know if there was any consideration when it comes to moving jails, this jail right across from schools, because as we know, jails are hubs for criminality. I mean, Hells Angels and MS-18 run the contraband in jails. So it's been brought up multiple times that, there's no data saying that society becomes more criminally active because offenders are moved back into their home towns. My question is, I'm not worried about the inmates. Anyone that works in institutions knows that it's not the inmates you worry about. It's the people that you're inviting to the facilities, the families, and these organized crime units to the facilities to bring drugs in. So what are you going to do? Yeah, what are you going to do to protect the schools and daycares around this jail? Because we know drones are an issue. You're going to be sharing the school, the same road as the school. So what are you doing to protect the Kemptville campus and the 2 schools and 2 daycares?
Maybe I'll start answering the question, and then I'll ask Karen Ellis and as well maybe Lisa to chime in. In terms of location, the adjacency to 416 absolutely was a consideration. But for us, major considerations were also that there was no third-party liens or third-party interests that were actually put on title. Other lands. There's another lands where the Rideau Correctional Center is down the streets. People have brought those lands up that why didn't you go to that land? And, that land did have a third party right that was there. And so we did not want to wait for 1, 2, 3 years to see what that right would entail and if that right would ever be lifted. And so that's an important aspect for us. As well, we didn't want to be close to any volatile sites like a nuclear power plant or energy. And obviously the size of the site to ensure that it could accommodate what we're building, but also the size of the site is important to us because we want to make sure that we're not putting a big piece of infrastructure on a small piece of land. We want to make sure that there's a lot of space so that we can, tuck it away, that we can have green space, that we can utilize, parts of our lands to integrate it into the community, or the community can use parts of our land. So in terms of the location, there are other factors. And in terms of, crime, I will hand it over to ADM Ellis, but for us, we do work with our local policing partners very well. We do have comments from them that talk about that, they do not see crime rates necessarily go up. Criminals do not want to spend a lot of time, I think, around our jails because we have obviously correctional, officers. We have police there as well, coming in and out. So that's the last place they want to be. And in terms of drone technology, this is going to be an asset that is very technologically enhanced, and that we are going to have sensors. We're going to have, we are testing drone technology as well, so that we can take control of drones, so that people don't even try, because they know that now we have the technology, and so that they never try to do these kinds of things. So we obviously are going to really invest in that technology in this asset, and we're already testing that across the province as well. So maybe I'll ask Karen or Lisa to jump in as well.
I certainly add a couple of comments. I mean, the first thing I would say is number one, the high standard, building this from a bricks and mortar perspective to be a very, very secure institution physically. The second thing is that we have very well-trained staff. We have very competent people who understand and know the business of corrections, and they are very good at what they do. And thirdly, without getting into details, which would not be appropriate, but to pick up on what Ali said, we have got a very holistic approach working with our partners in policing and other areas, thoughtful and increasingly comprehensive approach to dealing with that kind of issue around contraband and things coming into institutions. And we are vigilant on that and work on that on a daily basis. And I'll invite Lisa to add anything else she wants to from her lived experience within the institutions. But you can be sure that these issues are front of mind, and we are always attentive to them. We are always going to be evolving and improving the way we deal with these issues as technology improves and as our information and analysis and data improves over time. So it's a constant effort that is part of being in the business of running correctional facilities. Lisa, I don't know if you'd like to add anything.
Sure. Comments. I can appreciate where you're coming from. I've not worked in the federal system, the provincial system only. So I can't compare except to say I'm quite sure that there are many differences in the way our institutions are run, and a lot of that being on the length of stay. Our provincial system being 2 years less a day, and as Ali mentioned before, the average of 30 to 60-day stays compared to what you obviously deal with in the federal system. As far as contraband strategies, we do have a lot of different strategies in place, and new strategies that we have pilots on, looking at ways to minimize the introduction of contraband into the institutions. And I just want to touch on your comment about the programming. You're absolutely right, Jess. We can't, an inmate can't get into long-term 6, 12, 2-year programming when they're in custody in our system for 30 or 60 days. However, with the resources that we do have inside, not just our volunteers, but our staff that are addictions counselors, social workers, recreation officers, et cetera, what they strive to do in that short amount of time for someone who's interested is start the programming inside and connect them with our community partners on the outside so that they can continue. So I don't want to discredit your comment about the length of stay in programming, because you're absolutely right, but we do make those extra efforts in the provincial system to make those connections when the inmates do get out of custody. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. We'll go. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, if I can just add, there is programming that is commensurate to the amount of time that we do have individuals in our care, and that does continue over to their community supervision. And some of these involve, they're as basic as life skills, anger management, a number of things that can help them support their transition back into community. So and certainly we also work with Indigenous organizations. We have in our facilities Native liaison officers that work with Indigenous clients to help support culturally sensitive and appropriate transitions. So, as Lisa mentioned, and as others have mentioned, there are different ways that we can support that transition. It is limited by the time we have individuals with us, but that doesn't mean it isn't something that we play an active role in doing. And that also includes for issues like mental health and addictions and those kinds of supports.
Thank you. We'll go back to a few chat questions that were typed in. So please define what local or surrounding area refers to in terms of jobs at the facility. Does this definition extend to Kingston and Ottawa?
Yeah, maybe I'll start there, and then Karen. In terms of local, we're talking about, being within Ottawa, 50, 60, 70 kilometers away. In terms of Kingston, it definitely does not go as far as that. We do have our Lindsay facility that is close to Kingston. Truly, this was about finding, a location that met the majority of our criteria. And I understand that there's a lot of questions about location here and why, but truly it was just that it did meet a lot. And I understand that is an impact to that local smaller community, but it does meet a lot of our needs in terms of what a site provides. So I don't know, Karen, if you have anything else to add.
The only thing I would say is, that obviously we've got a fairly good timeline, a length of time to work with the community, including the hospital, school boards, and people who have concerns and ideas to try and shape this and design it and make it into something that can be as Ali said earlier, low impact on the community, but a really effective and progressive correctional institution that's really going to try and do more and better for the people who are housed there. It also allows us, as I said earlier, to make better use and more focused use of the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre, which will be upgraded. And it's having the two institutions in these locations. It's going to allow us really to manage those populations more effectively and do more in terms of rehabilitation and supports. And I really do want to reinforce what Renew said. Even though many of those stays may be short in that short-term range, there's still a lot of planning and thought and effort that does go in to really trying to do the best we can with people who come into our custody. So just to say, there's time to help us to shape this and to think about the design and making it fitting into the community in a way that will over time, I hope, bring you more comfort with the idea. And I really do appreciate, as I think we all do, how many of you would be feeling at this point. And that's why, as Ali said at the very start, we're beginning this conversation. We are listening, and we want to work with you in the coming 6 or 7 years, which gives us some really good lead time. I hope and believe we can work with you to resolve and help address many of these concerns and questions.
Thank you. The next question is, do you know who Joshua Halliday Rungens is? Do you know where he is? Can you justify your claim that the facility will be safe when Joshua walked away from the Brockville facility the other day?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that specific question. Lisa, I don't know if you can, but we could always find out and provide a response later. I'm sorry, I can't answer that right now.
I think I can, ADM Ellis.
Okay, thank you.
This is just recently, and I apologize if I do have the wrong name, but if it's just the recent this week or last week, that individual was at St. Lawrence Valley and was discharged to the local hospital upon release, and that is where he did walk away from. So I hope that clarifies. He didn't escape from the jail.
Okay, thank you. Will there be a vegetated green space barrier to hide the barrier fencing from City Route 44 Prescott Street? And will lighting pollution be minimized? That one, I think you've spoken about that. But will there be a vegetated green space barrier to hide the barrier fencing from County Road 44?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about the lighting, but absolutely, we'll look at vegetation. We'll look at setbacks to the actual facility, so it's set back as far as possible. So, you know, from an eyesight perspective, it's further away. But we definitely want to create a visual where, one, it's low profile, two, it's set back, and three, that there is greenery surrounding it as well, so that you really don't know, and that it's just integrated into the landscape as much as possible. The example that we have is we worked very well with our neighbors in Windsor, the one neighbor that I spoke about, where we sat, we looked at orientation of the facility with her because her house was right there and she's a single female. We looked at vegetation and greenery to make sure that, you know, there was, you know, that she really couldn't see the facility or only saw certain aspects of it through the greenery. And so we do go to great lengths to working with those local partners to ensure that.
Why are you building to maximum security specifications when you are planning to house non-maximum prisoners?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and I'll allow Karen to jump in here. That is the standard that we build to. We need to ensure that, you know, the safety of the people inside are maintained at all times. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that even though we don't necessarily need it, that we are building for it to ensure the safety of everyone, our staff, inmates, clients, volunteers, everyone. And so that's why we build it to maximum security. But really the maximum security has a lot to do with the bricks and mortars that we build, as well as the technology that we're going to put in terms of our camera, in terms of our sensors, in terms of, I said, the drone technology, and in terms of, you know, the locks that we have and the hinges that we have, you know, in our frames. And that's really what we talk about maximum security. As you saw from the pictures that we showed you, when you look at our day room, has a lot of light, has a lot of glass, has a lot of circulation space, you know, has the tables where people can sit and play games, and, you know, has TVs, has soft furniture as well, so that you know, our inmates can sit and watch and keep themselves occupied as well. You saw from the outside, you know, we did not use that, what you would see on TV, the two pictures where you saw that there was a concrete courtyard, where, you know, the inmates go outside and walk in that courtyard. No, we want them to have grass. We want them to have, you know, a pergola. And really that's because we're trying to house the, you know, as much as possible, minimum to medium security inmates. We want to make sure that, you know, they're leaving in 30, 60 days. We want to make sure that we're giving them as much programming as possible in that amount of time, and that, to Renew's point, that we're reintegrating them back into the community as well, so that we don't have reoffenders. We don't want to, in the future, we don't want to be in the business of reoffenders, and we don't want to hold people in our facilities and just house them to make them more hardened and make them more criminals. We are truly trying to turn the page and move forward. And a lot of that comes from, you know, this government and the investments that they've made. We've had $500 million in investments in infrastructure and infrastructure upgrades beyond this facility. We announced 500 staff. And a part of that staff, it wasn't correctional officers, that was the majority of that staff that we announced. We're going to bring program officers, recreational officers, rehabilitation officers. We're going to bring mental health nurses in as well, and addiction specialty people in as well, so that we can help these people so that they don't become hardened criminals and that we don't ever see them again. And that's what we're really trying to do here. So I don't know, Karen, if you have anything else to add.
I think you covered it really well, Ali. As we said, predominantly to the maximum possible, we would have minimum and medium classified inmates in Kemptville. If there were some that were classified as maximum, as Lisa said earlier, they're going to be housed in a particular way within the institution. And so there's a lot of planning and thought that goes into that. But I think, we manage this. We've been managing the mix for years, decades, more than that, across the province, and we have very good staff and very good administration in the institutions managing this day to day.
Thank you. We'll do a couple more questions via chat, and then I'll go back to live questions. So due to the location's proximity with the highway, would there be plans to connect College Road with the 416 via a non-ramp?
Thank you for that. We have worked in the past with MTO and our municipal colleagues to actually do just that. We've done it on the community safety side with OPP assets. And if we find from the traffic study that it'll have a huge hindrance on the local traffic, then we will 100% work with MTO and the local community to try to find that, it could be a direct access, it could be a service road that goes to potentially another entrance as well. So we will try to do that. And that's why we do undertake that traffic study to figure out what is the best way to minimize that impact on the community. So it is not in the realm of possibility that we would create that access while we're working towards it. But we need to work with local authorities as well as the Ministry of Transportation to ensure that we can actually do that.
At the October 30th stakeholder sessions, you had in your slide maximum security inmates, and now today you've removed that. Could you please explain?
Yeah, absolutely. What we wanted to do is make sure that we discussed at that session that, we always have to house all three levels of inmates. But we wanted to show that predominantly in this facility, the way we're designing it, the way we're going to provide the programming, we really want to focus this facility on the minimum to medium. And we want to keep, the Ottawa facility for people that are more maximum, that would be going into jail, going into the courts daily, in and out. And so we removed it because we wanted to make sure that predominantly that is our focus. And that's who we're trying to focus and who we're trying to build for. We're not trying to build it for the maximum security people that we're just holding on remand before they are sentenced to go into the federal system. I don't know, Karen, if you want to add anything.
No, I think you've covered it very accurately.
I could say, Ali, if it helps just to clarify, an institution like Southwest, I'm referring to it again because it's one of our newer institutions, again, built bricks and mortar to maximum security exterior building, and inside though has what Ali was describing earlier, minimum to medium interior, soft furniture, dorm settings, direct supervision. But there are a couple of areas in the unit that have more secure internal settings. So if that helps to clarify the difference between the max construction on the outside of the building and what we're doing on the inside of the buildings with the day rooms, et cetera, and the living areas for the inmates.
Thank you. I'll give you just a little background. I was a animal scientist working at the Kemptville College for over 20 years. And so I'm very disappointed on a number of fronts. The potential use of this land for agriculture is still very large. Some of the things that are happening these days in agriculture with regenerative agriculture, the land still lends itself to that kind of project. And one of my questions is, will some of that land still be available for agricultural use?
Absolutely, we want to work with whoever's interested from an agricultural perspective. We understand the cultural importance of this site from an agricultural perspective. And so we definitely want to work with you to see how we can enhance that agricultural piece. The best example I have is in Thunder Bay. We work with local members there to make sure that the sacred gardens are still thriving, having a greenhouse on the site so the community can come in and out and utilize that greenhouse, and any other agricultural uses that you may have. If the community feels that they want to use the excess lands for that, we are happy to help cultivate that. for that purpose. If it's recreational, that is fine. If it's for park space, that is fine. If it's for agricultural space, that is fine. We definitely want to work to see how we can enhance that the other pieces of the land to see what's the best use for the community.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask one question. I've actually got a few, but I think they're in the queue. I'll start with, I know Infrastructure Ontario has a list of surplus lands that they make publicly available. I think the last update that I've been able to locate is from 2018. It lists about 243 surplus land locations. The solicitor, the ministry has commented that there was a list of approximately 100 locations that were considered for this facility. So my question is, I'm wondering, can the ministry provide the public with a list of these 100 property locations, whether they're surplus owned or privately owned?
Yeah, thank you for that. We can definitely take that question back. Us as Solicitor General don't own those lands and don't own the disclosure of those lands. The Ministry of Government Services, working alongside Infrastructure Ontario, do. And so maybe Angelo, if you have any comments in terms of that, or if you've dealt with this in your other projects, you can speak now, or if not, we'll definitely take that question back. Absolutely. Angelo?
Yeah, no, we'll definitely take that question back. There was a very broad search, and we do have lists of surplus lands and the lands that we own, and it's public information, so we'll take it back.
Thank you for taking my question. I've heard a number of the residents in the Kemptville area say that they're not interested in having it in so close to the village. There was a minimum security jail across the river in the southern part of the city of Ottawa. I believe it was west of Birch Rapids. I'm just wondering, why wouldn't the group looking at the jail consider this property? It would impact far fewer people. It would put it a little bit further away from any sort of Kemptville, larger city or town. Was this area, was this property considered? I believe the Ontario government owns it, if I'm not mistaken. Why not consider this property? Thank you.
Comment, off the top of my head, I don't know that area of land. I have lived in Ottawa for many years myself as well, but I don't know that specific one. We do know that the property where the Rideau Center was, that property does have a third-party rights, and that's why we did not go there. But in terms of this property, I don't think it's the same as that one. I don't know if Rob or Angelo, this property off the top of your head and you can answer it. If not, what we can do is get you an answer in terms of why that property didn't suit the needs of it. So we can definitely take that back as well and follow up with you. I don't know, Rob or Angelo, if you know this one off the top of your head.
I have nothing more to add, Ali. We'll definitely look into it. Again, same answer as the last time. We looked at so many properties. Our land group looked at like literally 130 properties. So there was criteria, right, that we were looking for. So we'll take that back and answer the question more directly.
Okay, thank you. Due to the long distances to move detainees from such places as Ottawa and Brockville, etc., will there be protocols in place when detainees are moved to ensure the safety of the detainee, detention personnel, etc.?
Ali, certainly I'm going to ask Lisa to speak in detail about it, but the answer is yes, and Lisa can tell you a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Karen. And I'm interpreting the question to mean transferring detainees from one secure institution to another for various reasons, whether it's for what I mentioned earlier, for their discharge planning to be released into their community, or just based on their classification or being transferred to another institution for various other reasons. I'm hoping I've got the scope of your question correctly. And if that is it, then yes, we have trained correctional officers that are trained in under our community escort policy, and we have secure vehicles that are used, and there are procedures in place, including our escort procedures for transporting an offender or offenders in our institutional vehicles from one secure facility to another. I hope that answers your question.
Kemptville does not have any train or public transit services for visiting family members. How will this be accommodated?
Now, maybe Karen, I can start, and you can supplement. In terms of transportation back into the community for our inmates, we 100% ensure that we provide that transportation to get them back. So having the transportation loop is not a major hindrance. In terms of families that actually do come in, they do have to obviously find their own way to come in. But what we are trying to do is really invest in technology and in video, and so that those families that for some reason can't get there, on a weekly basis, probably because they can't get a ride or for some other reason don't have the time, then we are trying to invest in that video. So just as COVID is happening, as people are getting more used to video, we want to make sure that we ingrain that into our facilities so that you can see the loved ones, so that they can see their loved ones, and they don't have to make a trek to come see them every week if they don't have the means. When they do come to our facility, what we're trying to do is really accommodate space so that they can spend time and not just see them through potentially a piece of glass. We want to have family visitation areas as well, where families can come and visit together so that they feel normal, almost akin to a small living room, so that they can spend a little time with their families as well. And that's all a part of that rehabilitation focus and lens that we want to bring, and that connectivity back to the real world, so that when they are discharged and reintegrated, that again they hopefully don't reoffend. I don't know, Karen, do you have anything else to add?
Just to say, that the visits, whether they're by remote means or in person, are very, very important for the well-being and for the support of people who are in custody. And just to say that I think in most cases it would likely be a day trip that might be possible for people. There may be some who come from a bit of a further distance and might need to stay overnight, but just kind of given the location, I think that probably the majority of visitors, might be able to come in and have a good decent length of a visit, as Ali mentioned, and then be able to get home. But of course, the families do have to find their way there.
I was just going to add, ADML, just to what Ali was talking about with the video visits as well. We've learned, not that we weren't going down that road already, but with the pandemic, it's definitely heightened our awareness of how important the video visits are, because we did have to, for a period of time, put limitations on public visits because of travel and entering into the institution, but it didn't have an effect on our video visits for our population. So in our new builds, as Ali was speaking to, that will be an option based on the accessibility for families that don't have transportation, the 45 minutes or hour or whatnot out of where they live to get to Kemptville. We do have the video visits at Toronto South Detention Center as well, and again saw the same increase in video visits throughout the pandemic based on having to restrict the in-person. So hopefully that helps.
And definitely, for example, in the north, where we, as we said earlier, we're doing infrastructure investments there as well. There are many Indigenous members in our population and our facilities there, and they live very, very far away from their communities and support. And in some cases, the cost would be prohibitive or very, very difficult for families to visit them and travel. And so this issue of using the technology, making it possible for people to sort of see each other on the screen and have that kind of visit is something that we're thinking about in every part of the province. And sometimes the needs are even greater. For example, in the north, just to show how important it is that we have that option and are working on that.
To build on that comment of Indigenous clients, one of the questions that came up is how have Indigenous groups been engaged to date?
Yeah, maybe I can start, Karen, as well. So to date, we've now undertaken, I believe, 4 Indigenous consultations. with various Indigenous groups, and they've been generally very, very positive. Good feedback in terms of how we can increase our programming, how we can potentially bring, certain Indigenous assets, teepees or longhouses, or even other types of greenery as well onto the secured part of the site. And so just like with the local community, with our Indigenous community, we're going to continue this iterative dialogue. And we work very well with our Indigenous communities in Thunder Bay in terms of building the new jail there. And we've had multiple sessions with them in terms of what we are building, the types of space we're building inside of the jail for culturally appropriate space, the type of programming we might want to bring to help enhance, and also the space outside to help make sure that we're encapsulating any cultural aspects that they want, whether if it's a sacred garden or greenhouse. And so we work very well with them, and we're translating obviously those lessons learned here, and we've already started engaging with them. If I may, just to switch gears for a second, I did get a message back that says that the Burt Rapids property, the question came up of why didn't we take that? And the quick answer to that is, and we can follow up, is that did have a third party claim on it. And that's why we didn't go to that property. But we can get you a potentially a more fulsome answer.
Perhaps I could just add on the question. I mean, we know that there's an overrepresentation of Indigenous people in correctional institutions. So this is why we do put such a great emphasis on making sure that we have the Native inmate liaison officers, that we have those folks and elders who are able to work with our inmates and provide spiritual supports and cultural supports and programming, and also the Indigenous groups that we spoke with this week were very, very positive in the sense of bringing that perspective of the whole idea of restorative justice, of how do we actually try to get at the causes of people finding themselves in the system, and how do we support them, and to pick up on my colleague Renew's comments earlier in her area of expertise, there's got to be a real way of bringing together that planning and the right partners to try and help and support Indigenous people when they leave the institutions to have a better chance of successful reintegration back into society and not to reoffend. And I think it's really important to understand that everybody is a human being in this topic we're talking about tonight, and everybody has a story, and we don't always know that story. And with this particular population, there's a very deep view of just the traditional knowledge and the teachings that our Indigenous partners have said are so important to working with this population, and we're very, very committed to that.
Okay, thank you. How will you ensure the children at the two French schools located in front of the facility will be duly protected when sex offenders have permission to leave for the day or a few hours?
Perhaps Lisa might want to comment on that for us, please. Thanks, Lisa.
Sure. When we talk about, when I mentioned earlier in the slide presentation about temporary absence permits, in our institutions, our provincial institutions, there are not unescorted temporary absence permits. They are for purposes, as I alluded to, for medical appointments, et cetera, that can't be taken care of within the institution. There would be examples would be possibly an escorted funeral visitation, private funeral visitation for a parent or a child, and that would be arranged, privately with the funeral home, et cetera. But they are escorted temporary absences. They're not just, how do I say that? There won't be offenders just walking around outside the institution. They are, there's a purpose for them. This type of institution is not a minimum security, like halfway house, so to speak, where the offenders would just be walking around outside. All of our offenders are escorted. I don't know if that clarifies.
Yes, thank you. So Kemptville has antiquated water, sewage facilities, and no local police services. Is there a plan in place to address these major gaps?
Well, maybe I'll take that question. So we are going to, definitely we know that there's an upgrade project in terms of the sewer and the sewer and the utilities for the city. We want to get in and work with the local authorities to make sure that any upgrades that are needed, that we are paying for them fully, and those upgrades are the upgrades that we need are incorporated with the current project as well, so that it minimizes the impact. I know that our consultants, our architectural and environmental consultants, NOR, have already come to meet with the local authorities as well to start getting that early read, because we do not want to, quote unquote, miss the boat while you're doing any kind of upgrades. We want to make sure that we're paying to ensure that there is no, impacts in 2-3 years from now, that we're finding that synergy and using good taxpayers' money to do it now versus later.
The next question is, will there be a drug rehabilitation program in this facility, knowing a lot of crimes are drug related?
Well, I'm certainly going to ask Mena and Melanie Mayo to comment on this one, and as well, Lisa may have a comment, but certainly we have got, as I said, really, really good healthcare capacity and ability to do treatment, and we certainly have a very good mental health and addiction strategy that is being implemented with our healthcare staff. So I will turn to Mena and or Melanie if they would like to provide some specific comments on that one. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. And I will invite Melanie to jump in, but from a programming perspective,
oh, you're cutting out, Mena.
In terms of substance abuse situations where there are issues of usage. And I will turn it over to Melanie to supplement as well.
Well, the province actually recently announced some additional investments in substance use supports within institutions. And so that's something that we are actively working on this fiscal year and beyond, looking at how we can provide end-to-end supports when people are in our care and custody, to provide them the really high quality mental health and substance use and addiction supports, and then support their successful reintegration back into their home communities with continuity of care as well. So that new investment is going to allow us to place a greater emphasis on the end-to-end programming that we provide. But absolutely, it's been something that, as Mena said, we've been working to enhance our programming, and we've been working to ensure that we have specialists within our institutions who can best support people, and also ensuring that our staff are trained in how best to support people with substance use and addictions issues.
So one of the questions is, can an inmate decide to stay in Kemptville after their time has been served, or do they have to return to their home cities?
I can probably speak to this just based on what I had said earlier. Historically, provincially, our OPP detachments and municipal police forces have indicated when we've chatted with them that there isn't an increase in people being released from correctional facilities staying in the local communities. To answer your question, we can't tell anybody where to live, obviously, but there has not been a history of that. Offenders historically want to get back to their home communities, their families, their friends, their houses, everything else, and are not relocating after a stay in our facilities. I hope that answers your question.
And in fact, just to also reinforce what Lisa had said earlier, I mean, as part of the release from our custody, she spoke about how we will transport securely people back to their home community, or get them to public transport in order to get back to their home community. So there's actual processes and supports in place to do that, exactly what Lisa's talking about.
Do one more question and then we'll finish with a couple of verbal questions. So Ontario has 124 ridings. MPP Steve Clark's riding of Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rio Lakes is a small riding. However, it will have 3 provincial correction facilities. Has any thought been done to express an interest in locating the facility in their community, in other communities?
Yeah, if I may, what we're trying to do here is really, have facilities, whether if it's in Brockville, Quinte, this facility, in Ottawa, where we're creating more low profile and smaller numbers of people. We have learned that building these bigger jails is not good from a supervision perspective, is not good from a rehabilitation perspective, and obviously from an asset perspective, being small and nimble is much better for us. So that's what we're really trying to do is upgrade the facilities that we have that are smaller, expand them to make sure they have the appropriate space. Building new, smaller facilities like this as well versus, what we call mega facilities is really the way we want to move forward now and in the future as well.
Okay, I have 4 questions, please. So the first one is that Angelo mentioned that there would be planning applications submitted as part of this prison process. My understanding is that the province was exempt from local planning applications. Therefore, what planning applications would be submitted? Second question, is there a definition of outside the institutional perimeter? I think Lisa had mentioned that in the presentation, so I'm just wondering if that means within the fence or outside the fence. Third question, in the comparison of prisons in North Bay and other communities, those prisons were constructed in 1928, 1929, and 1973 respectively. Are there more modern examples of prisons built more recently, and what setbacks did those prisons achieve from local institutional uses? And the fourth question is, following construction into the future, how would we as residents ever know if an expansion was proposed? Thank you.
In terms of the other prisons, in terms of newer, more modern prisons, Southwest Detention Center in Windsor is one. The Toronto South Detention Center in Toronto is another one, but that one again is a mega one, and we're not trying to go there anymore. But even the outside exterior of that is integrated into the urban landscape, so it doesn't necessarily look like a prison. There is a modern one that we're building in Thunder Bay right now as well. And so those are really the 3 examples. In terms of planning application, I'll allow Angelo to supplement this, and I'll hand it off to Lisa to talk about the perimeter. In terms of planning application, we try to work within the zoning and within the planning process of any municipality. The Crown does have Crown right, and it can evoke that on any property, but we don't like that. That is not the way we function, especially within Solicitor General, but I don't think generally as a province, we do not like to do that as a Crown. And so what we like to do is work with the local planning and make sure that we have all the right approvals, that we're looking at issues, whether if it's setbacks, greenery, traffic, or any other ancillary uses for the exterior space that we have, or the exterior land. So we try to follow that planning process still, even though we have the ability to invoke Crown right. I don't know, Angela, if you have anything else to add to that. If not, I'll hand it over to Lisa to talk about the exterior and the perimeter.
No, in all the projects that I've done over the last 13 years at IO, we've never invoked Crown rights. We do not like to do that. We've never had to. We've always followed the processes that are in place. And as far as, what planning applications, well, site plan approval would be one of them that we would go through. So that's just for starters.
Thank you, both of you. When I speak to perimeter fencing, to answer that question that you had, as I said earlier in the slide presentation, in terms of the facility being built to the standards that what they will be, the perimeter fencing is just an added layer of security. So I think what your inquiry was, as if inmates will be able to walk around outside of the building, but within the security perimeter of the fencing? And the answer to that is no. As soon as they leave the building, they are escorted by trained community escort officers. And whether that's for transfer or to walk from one building or pod to another, but they will not be between the building and the fencing without community escort officers. So the reason for the perimeter fencing, just to go back to that, is just an added layer of security. I hope I answered your question.
Resident of Kemptville at this time, but I have invested in potentially building a home in the community. So I'm happy for this engagement session because it's informing my decision whether or not to actually move to the community. I guess my question is really about the economic benefits that the correctional facility will bring to Kemptville, and not necessarily for the short term in terms of construction, but in terms of the longer term. So in the presentation, there were a slide that noted some dollar figures in terms of large infrastructure projects. However, a correctional facility is not like a large infrastructure project that brings economic activity like a transit system or a recreational facility. So I was wondering if there is any work that's been done in terms of, apart from just individuals maybe visiting a local coffee shop or restaurant, any real concrete numbers in terms of the economic benefit that this potential facility will bring to the town of Kemptville over the long term.
Allow Angelo to answer that question.
Well, we can look at this in a number of different ways. One is during the planning and the build period, there's obviously all of the economic benefits that we talked about of using local contractors, local products, drawing upon the restaurants and the coffee shops that are there. But then there's also the longer term, which will occur during the operational phase. So there are subcontractors that would be used to cut grass, that sort of stuff. Those are all things that the company that's going to operate this facility will take advantage of in terms of local subcontractors. Other than that, though, there's also staff that will be used for operations. Right, and those new staff, I would suspect, and people from Solgen would be able to speak to this better than me, that could be recruited depending on the staffing model that they would be using. I'll hand it back to you, Ali.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, there's probably two types. I mean, there will be jobs for local people in terms of local maintenance, within that facility, as well as, local service providers that bring services to that facility. It could be potentially for goods. It could be potentially for, services on the outside of the facility, like landscaping or snow plowing. So I think in terms of, new staff being hired to go into the facility that aren't correctional officer, there's definitely that opportunity, as well as, smaller service contracts for helping service, outside of the building, but potentially the inside of the building as well, whether if it's, whether if it's roofing or other aspects. We obviously, we try to use local contractors because it's easier and more nimble, and they can get access to that facility quicker. And so those are likely the different types.
Hello, thank you very much. Yes, just a quick comment and then a question. In regards to the process, I'm a little disappointed. First of all, appreciating that we're being allowed to ask questions, but a little disappointed that we stopped being able to see each other's comments in the chat box. I think it could have been that you could have had a section if people wanted to send a question versus just commenting. It just feels like it's not quite as transparent as it could be. I would have liked to have shared some of my thoughts, having heard the original presentation at the stakeholders meeting. Anyway, having said that, I think a lot of issues have been touched on. So the one I'll focus on is what we actually know about the state of provincial corrections. And your reference to the Windsor institution is of course, somewhat disingenuous. When you talk about design excellence, I believe that was language used when that institution was also built. And we know from media reports, the sad state of affairs in that facility. We also know provincially that anywhere from 65 to 70% of provincial prisoners are on remand, meaning that they have not, in fact, generally been found guilty, or they're waiting for sentencing. So for years now, you've had the opportunity to address that issue, to improve.
15 seconds.
improve the issues around delays in court, and more importantly, the number of people who are being held unnecessarily in provincial jails. So I see a concern that you're really choosing to expand at a time when there's so many opportunities to make real reforms. These are the same folks who are suffering through this pandemic, who are also being disproportionately imprisoned in our province. Thank you.
What I'll do is I'll answer a bit of it. I'll hand it over to Karen to supplement, as well as to Lynn Norris, our modernization lead, to supplement, and potentially to our Ministry of Attorney General partners, if they're still on the line as well. Well, when you look at Southwest, you mentioned that location. That was design excellence in terms of the outside of the building, and in terms of the inside of the building, in terms of the day rooms and the green space that they have, that was design excellence. I think, where we falter, to be honest, is that, the government at that time, built a great building, invested in that building, but did not give us the resources inside the building to adequately enhance what that building was supposed to be and do. And I think with this government, Colleen, if you go back and look at over the last year, the announcements that we have made in corrections, whether if it's adding the 500 staff, adding the 500 million in infrastructure, increasing, mental health services, increasing nursing, we're going to be increasing programming as well as some other pieces in terms of the justice sector continuum, because, as people commit crime, the courts obviously determine what should be done with them, and then we get them, unfortunately. So we are a catch basin as corrections, but as a sector, this government has really tried to push that forward. And I would say at a high level, the strategy really is, one, we want to start diverting people out. And we have invested in we are starting to invest in technology so that people get out of can be monitored from a GPS perspective, can be diverted out from a restorative justice perspective. We want to divert people out of our facilities, number one. Number two is, we do want to build, as we're doing now, new infrastructure that meets the needs, but we want to have the appropriate staffing within that and the appropriate means. So we don't want to, have staffing that's over egregious on, let's say, correctional officers. We want to have a blend of correctional officers, program officers, rehabilitation officers, mental health nurses, addiction nurses, and that's really what this government is trying to invest in. And then on the back end, our ADM Renew talked about this, is discharging and community reintegration. They're making investments so that we make sure that we have the tools, and we're working right with the partners to make sure that people are reintegrated back into their local communities, and they have the supports once they're integrated back, whether if it's addiction supports, whether if it's housing supports, they want to make sure. So we're trying to change the whole continuum. And I think the examples that we had in the past is we built these new buildings, but we just don't invest in the right programming in what's inside, and then what we're doing on the outside once we move those inmates out. So I think with this government recognized that, they came into this problem and they truly are investing. And, I definitely encourage you to go back. And what we can do is even go away and with our communication folks is get a list of all of those investments and all those announcements as well. Because personally, I've come to this portfolio because I want to be here, and I have not seen this type of investment over the last year and a half that we have had. So maybe I can open up to Karen, Lynn, Renew, or our MAG colleagues to supplement in any way.
I think Lynn will obviously have things to add, and the others. I just want to say that, I would say along with Ali that there isn't a single person here and the people on our teams that doesn't want to make things better. And the government's invested, and we are all very, very committed. It is a big, complex, tough system. The issues, the root causes, the issues that cause people's lives to go a certain way, and they end up in the justice system and may end up in our institutions. That's a very, very complex, tough set of interdependencies. And that's why this whole of justice and system perspective is that whole direction that Lynn set out and spoke about. We are working very hard, and it does take time to try and improve and use new tools, new technologies, and bring a new mindset to all of this. But that's what we're all committed to. Lynn, I don't know if you'd like to comment as well.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Maybe I'll just add a couple of points to what both Ali and Karen have already talked about in terms of the cross-sector approach to be able to reduce that remand population that Colleen talked about. And I can also maybe mention a couple of things that are happening again across the justice partners to be able to improve the speed with which criminal cases are resolved or better court case management. And again, some of our colleagues from the court side of the justice sector, if they're still on a call, can jump in as well. So in terms of reducing the remand population, across the partners, we are implementing a number of different initiatives, including Crown attorneys have provided significant training for police so that when someone first comes into contact with the criminal justice system through policing, the police have really good information around their powers to actually use their discretion to release an offender rather than hold them in custody, potentially for a bail hearing. And of course, doing that in a safe way. We've also worked again across the justice partners and with communities to build bail programs. And I spoke about some of these at the beginning of the presentation. And again, the focus on providing bail beds, other types of bail programs, including verification and supervision programs, is to be able to increase the number of people who can safely be returned to the community instead of being held in custody. And again, to the point that was made, and keeping that percentage of the population in the institutions that is on remand so high. And I think it's also important to note that there is a recognition that part of what's contributing to the high remand population is not so much a significant increase in the number of people coming into the institution, but the amount of time that remanded inmates are spending in the institution. And so there have been, again, significant efforts with our justice partners to look at how to reduce the amount of time it takes to resolve a criminal case, so that if someone has been remanded into custody while they're awaiting the resolution of their case, they can have that resolution quickly. And if there is then a custodial sentence coming from that criminal charge, they can serve that sentence and again, then move into the process to be reintegrated back into the community. And there's, as I said, a very strong effort across the justice partners, and again, very strongly led by the courts, by the judiciary, who have been very active in Ontario in bringing prosecution, whether it's the federal crowns or the provincial crowns, the Defence Bar, Legal Aid Ontario, policing, and representatives from the ministries, to be able to look at all sorts of different interventions to be able to improve the timeliness for resolving criminal cases. So whether that's looking at ways to ensure that the upfront disclosure of information between the prosecution and the defense happens quickly, whether it is looking at opportunities to give defendants access to a Crown pretrial or a judicial pretrial, where the prosecution and the defense can sit down and look at, are there ways to be able to resolve this case more quickly in order to have good outcomes. So that's just a sample of some of the efforts across the sector, but generally just to reinforce what we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, which is this is not just about building jails to incarcerate people, be they on remand or sentence. There are very strong efforts across the justice sector partners and with our other sector partners in health and education to be able to reduce the number of people who come into contact with the criminal justice system, and for those who do, to support them to be able to have access to services and interventions that will prevent them from coming back into the system. So I hope that answers some of your question.
Thank you. We will go to.
Sorry, if I could just add, in terms of those partnerships, we're also looking from a transition, community transition perspective. We also are working closely with our colleagues, some ministries that Lynn mentioned, but also with the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs, and really looking at shelter capacity and housing capacity and all those additional supports. But I would also say that, we know that there's a lot to address historically with respect to the correctional system writ large, both provincially and federally. And so the ministry itself has an anti-racism and anti-racism correctional plan that includes a very strong training component and a cultural competency component. We work very closely with our counterparts in the Ministry of the Attorney General. We work with our colleagues in the Indigenous Justice Division, which was established 5 years ago out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to really look at the institutions and programs and staff that we have and ensure that we are building capacity in terms of that cultural competency as well. So it really is about a significant shift in the approach that we're taking on a number of fronts. So I just wanted to add that piece as well.
I just wanted to thank you for an excellent presentation and for fielding all of our questions. My question/comment is around if there's going to be any volunteer programming opportunities available at the new facility. And the background for my question is as follows. I've been a resident of Kemptville since 1998, and I'm proud that our community is going to have an opportunity to contribute to initiatives in furtherance of much needed reforms in our criminal justice system. As we work towards incarcerating fewer people involved in nonviolent offenses, we also live with the reality of the current conditions at the notorious OCDC, where based on press reports, we understand that individuals there are often housed 2 to 3 to a cell that was designed for 1. The new facility, thankfully, is going to be much more humane and contemporary. I know that violence and intimidation is rampant amongst inmates at the OCDC, which is a very sad circumstance. And the facility certainly does not have the ability to provide the kind of programming and mental health care that, in my opinion anyways, we should be affording to those in unfortunate circumstances within our civilized society. I should add that I'm responsible for incarcerating thousands of people in my former life as a police officer, so I'm not often viewed as a softie on inmates, but I think we need to go to a much more humane treatment of those unfortunate people in society, and I think our community is well positioned to contribute to that. So I'm going to be planning on volunteering some of my time as a university professor, and I've spoken with several of my friends who play golf at our beautiful golf course, Equinel, with great life experience and a lot to offer, and they're interested in exploring some volunteer opportunities as well at the new facility. So that's my question/comment, and I'm looking forward to assisting with the project.
Absolutely, volunteer opportunities will be available, and I'll hand this off to Lisa as well to supplement. So yes, those opportunities are available. People with life experiences, absolutely, those are the kind of people we want. We are trying to rehabilitate people. We are trying to normalize people. Countless studies have shown that the type of environment you create, people will react to that environment. And what we're trying to do is not create hardened environments where we make hardened criminals just because we're bringing them into our facilities. We're trying to actually rehabilitate them. And in terms of Ottawa Carleton Detention Center, what we're trying to do there is decrease the population. We understand there's issues, absolutely. And I know we truly have not, tried to do anything transformative to try to change what's there. But this is the first step of doing that. What we're trying to do is not go out and build another mega. And what we're trying to do is, build a small facility that can focus on rehabilitation. Then what we want to do is take that Ottawa Detention Carleton Center, keep the best parts of it as an asset, and start retroing those pieces and start, making that a normalized environment as well. And so that, we start retroing it from a mental health perspective, from a programming perspective, from a segregation perspective, so that we start having positive infrastructure impacts, and then also bringing in, supplementary staffing as well, programming, wellness, mental health, so that we just don't have one asset that's thriving. By this strategy, we're trying to get 2 assets that are thriving and actually transforming. And that's really what we're trying to do here. And so I don't know, Lisa or Karen, if you have anything else to add, but I truly appreciate your comments, Greg. Thank you.
I do indeed appreciate them, and that is exactly the mindset that all of us have, and we're just going to just remain committed and dedicated and working every day to move to that new place.
And I would just add, you know, we do work with a lot of community service providers and volunteer organizations that you know, we're happy to help build relationships early in this process, and just look forward to working together. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for, can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. I'm probably at the other end of the continuum from the last speaker, and I'm kind of disappointed in the rationale that's been put forward for putting the facility in Kemptville. I personally would like to see the cost-benefit analysis, if any was undertaken, to put the facility in this community. And I have found that the comparisons that you've used, a 4,000 person community compared to Windsor or Thunder Bay or Brampton, it is really not fair. I mean, the infrastructure and capacity of those communities far surpass what's available in Kemptville. And so putting an institution of the sort that you've been talking about all evening is going to have a major impact on the culture of Kemptville. And you've really ignored the discourse that went on when the community decided to buy the Kemptville campus. So that's kind of one point. The other point is there's a good deal of analysis on the location or the siting of prisons in small communities in the U.S. And they really point to no positive economic impact in terms of unemployment is typically higher in communities with prisons compared to those that don't have prisons. Poverty is higher. The value of housing is lower. The average household wage is lower in communities with prisons. And the last point really has been reflected in your earlier comments. Well, let me finish. I mean, we've given you lots of time. This is important that you've talked about the economic benefits that are going to come to Kemptville, but people cutting grass and shoveling snow. I mean, those are not good jobs. Those jobs don't work to deal with the inequalities that have developed in our society over the last couple of decades. And so my view is that you've made a decision that suits your purposes, but you've largely ignored the wishes and the desires of the community. That living in a democracy and being part owners of that land, you've secretly gone away and decided to put a prison in that facility, on that property, without really telling us that you're planning to do it under the pretext of you didn't want to interrupt market pressures or other market.
Apologies that we had to cut you off, and I understand, you know, what's coming out in your voice. I understand in terms of, you know, the dissatisfaction that you have. Absolutely. I think, you know, when we talked about cost benefits, we talked that, you know, as taxpayers, from a provincial perspective, we're not paying, you know, $30-40 million to go buy just a piece of land and then have to pay all the money to then develop that land. This land was a government-owned land, and as Angelo said, we looked at many lands and we had a criteria, and it's transparently what met the majority of those criteria or not. And in terms of you know, in terms of other examples that we have, I know you feel that you know, Windsor and other ones aren't good competitors. But what I would say is that you know, when you look at the Lindsay community, when you look at the Penetanguishene community, they are communities that are 10, 15, 20,000 communities, so a little bigger than Kemptville. I know it's not an exact comparator, a little bigger, but it's not egregiously big. Those communities have jails that have over 1,000 beds in them. And so, it is actually 4 times the amount of beds that they have than what we're trying to build here. And they do have, a very healthy blend of minimum, medium, and maximum security inmates as well. And we do not see, a faltering of those small little communities at, 10, 15, or 15,000. We don't see rampant, crime going up. And we don't see necessarily housing prices going down either. We work very closely with those local police forces, whether Kawartha Police or the OPP. We ensure that the safety is met of the community, and if those communities were impacted in a highly negative way, especially because of that high bed count of 1,000 people, then you would see that there'd be a mass exodus of the community out of there, and you would likely see more supports of that. So I understand there's other studies out there, but honestly, qualitatively, our experience is not that. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that it's 100%, but qualitatively, absolutely, in those communities, we don't see that. So I don't know if Lisa, if you have anything else to add, or Karen beyond that.
I don't, Ali, to add. I would concur with everything that you said, just in my experience, as you've already mentioned, and I have earlier, about the relationships that we do have with the local police, and in any conversations with them, the OPP or municipalities, that it hasn't actually increased in crime or people staying, etc. I respect and understand the positions of those of you folks that are living there locally. I think someone had asked earlier, and I'd forgotten to mention it, about a comparison institution, if it didn't come up. And the Central East Correctional Centre, which we've referred to in Lindsay, Ontario, has almost 1,200 beds there, and it's on the outskirts of Lindsay, which is approximately 20,000 residents. So it's a good comparison as well as far as size. I know you're a much smaller community, but as far as the size of that institution and compared to the community, it is one to compare as well. And everything that we've said we've put in place as far as community engagement and engagements and relationships with our stakeholders, including the police, are things that we would continue to do in your area as well. I hope that helps.
Oh, I have one more live question and then one follow-up question.
I've had many questions, but I will limit my time to 2 questions. First of all, given that this is a public consultation that has to take place on Zoom due to COVID, I am wondering if a transcript or a recording will be made available to the public. I do know personally of people who cannot make it, either because their internet is not up to speed or because they have family obligations, remembering that we only knew about this for 10 days, so it's quite understandable that many people had to miss it. But I do know that they're very interested in the information. And also, number 2, I'd like to circle back to an earlier response saying that the ministry was not aware of any use for this land. However, I am under the impression that our municipality was trying to acquire it for the past 2 years, that they went to our MPP's office asking about it and did not receive an answer each time. Thank you.
Take this back with our facilitators in terms of how we can, for the people that couldn't attend, how can we get maybe some of the questions that were answered, some of the questions that were posed, and then maybe some of the answers. So we'll take that back and see. But also, tangential to that is that, this is not the only time we're going to come and talk to you. We're going to continue this dialogue. The next dialogues are going to be a little more focused with hopefully with the school boards, and the parent associations, as well as the hospital, and then other local service providers as well. And then, we're happy to have follow-up public sessions as well that might be a little more focused in terms of their subject content. So, this is not the only time you're going to be hearing from us. Absolutely. In terms of your question about the interest of the land or not, we follow a government process that has excess lands or lands that do not have rights on them currently that are distributed to us, and you know, any government, provincial or federal, can access those lands once they're out there. So that's how we got access to that land. In terms of the interaction with the local authorities and wanting that land, I can't answer that question. So
perhaps our mayor or another council person online could answer that at this time.
Just of time, what we'll do is we'll take that question back and hopefully work with the local authorities or the provincial authorities to try to give an answer. So we'll take that as a follow-up. Or if her worship is here still, then hi, your worship. So please, can you unmute her worship?
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks for the question. And of course, it's been a really substantive 3.5 hours. So I appreciate so many of you sticking with the consultation for so long. Certainly the municipality, certainly from a very early age, from a very early stage after this new council was elected, did express a strong interest in potentially acquiring the land if in fact it became available. So certainly that was made known to MPP Steve Clark, and Minister Clark, not to speak for him, but certainly indicated that before the land would be surplus, it was subject to an internal review by every ministry. So we kept inquiring every few months to make sure that Minister Clark was well aware that should the land be surplus, then we absolutely wanted a first crack at exploring the feasibility and the viability of the municipality acquiring the farmside lands. So that was the interest that was made to obviously the province through our own MPP, but we never got that opportunity.
Thank you, Her Worship. You know, we have stated before during this that we are absolutely, you know, open to working with everyone to figure out what else we can do with the excess part of those lands that we have as well. And so, you know, we don't want to hoard. We don't want to hoard, you know, the piece of land just for our purposes. We want to ensure that if we can, to use any part of those excess lands to figure out, again, whether it's park space or agricultural space or if it's recreational space, we want to ensure that we can work with the community to create something, you know, adequate and nice and what you want.
And Ali, if I could just build on that I think I just want to reinforce that definitely has been part of the conversation we've been having from the very early stages. And I want to thank you for, I think, understanding what I think is a very strong agricultural interest moving forward. And there's no doubt that myself and my council colleagues are having those discussions about what we leveraged out of this in terms of some of the remaining lands that we believe will be substantial. And I think we do want to honor the legacy of what was on the farm side. And we want some synergies between Kemptville campus and the farm side. And I believe that is possible. And I think the indications we're getting from the ministry is that there's some very, very important dialogue that we will continue to have to that end, but really the public consultation and what the community would like to see as well is really an important part of what we do. So this is why this consultation in November was so critical to our own deliberations. And that's why you've got, I think, most councillors, I think all council is on this call as well as myself, and we're listening very hard to the community, and we will be following up in terms of what are those next steps. And I know MPP Steve Clark is doing exactly the same. We've had lots of dialogue to that end.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. You know, and I do want to say, you know, kudos to Her Worship and the council as well as Minister Clark for being good advocates for, during the pandemic that we have. We're a frontline operation, so we've been working, over the last 8 months to, 12, 15 hours a day sometimes. And they really advocated to get us out here, to get us engaging early. We usually don't engage this early with the community after an announcement. And they got us out here. They make sure that we were transparent. So kudos for you to really push that for your community. And we're absolutely happy to be here today to do that.
Okay, Lisa, we have one last question. I know that we haven't addressed all the questions in the chat. I just want to reiterate to everybody that all of the questions will be saved and will be provided to the Ministry of the Solicitor General to prepare an FAQ going forward. But the last 3 questions, this 4th question on expansion, didn't get answered. However, there was a follow-up that said, if you're not going to build a mega prison, why not sever the land and give some to our municipalities so that we can be confident you won't expand?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It isn't in our, it isn't in our necessarily history to expand. Sometimes, smaller facilities, yes, we've done little expansions, meaning that, planning if the facility is, let's say 50 or 60 beds, we add another 10 beds, but, we haven't done major expansions in a long time. And again, based on our transformational strategy, we want to build this asset and never expand again. If anything, we want to build this asset and not fill it up to 230 beds or so on. What we want to do is build this asset and only be able to operate this asset at 75% capacity or 85% capacity. So we only have 200 inmates in there at any one time. That is our actual goal, and that's why we're investing in this transformation. Historically, we haven't invested in a transformation like this, and so that's why we are very hopeful. The executives that you heard from here today, Karen Ellis, Lynn Norris, Renew, myself, we are not from corrections. We actually came here because of this transformational agenda. We come from different portfolios, whether if it's federal government or infrastructure or other pieces, and the court system, and we're coming here because we believe in this transformation. So we are trying to move this forward, and it's not like before because we have the money. We have the executives who are motivated. We have a minister and a government who's motivated to help us as a bureaucracy. And so we do not want to expand this facility. And definitely we can work with the local partners to see if there's an ability to sever that land as well, or to maybe if from a zoning perspective, have rights to that land, so that there's something concrete there. So we can definitely have that dialogue, and we are open to that dialogue 100%.
So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for their patience as we worked our way through the technological challenges of questions and answers. It's not an easy thing to do. And so everybody was patient, everybody was respectful. I want to thank you. You made my job much easier. And as a facilitator, I didn't have to mute anybody, give any warnings. I really appreciate that. And I will turn it over to Ali to give the closing remarks. And again, I thank everybody for their patience and the respectful way that the Q&A went.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. I truly want to appreciate everyone that signed on today. I think, my beginning words were, this is a journey, and that is true. This is the first part of the journey. Also in the beginning, I said, we really want to hear from local voices. And so thank you for everyone who isn't a local voice, who allowed those local voices to truly come out and dominate this conversation, because that is exactly what we wanted. I want to thank Her Worship and MPP Clark for, again, keeping us transparent and honest, and continuing to work with our minister's office, Minister Jones, to see what we can do to help accommodate, to continue to be transparent. So I appreciate them as well. And beyond that, all I have to say is we're going to continue this dialogue. Again, we're going to go meet with the school boards. We're going to meet with the hospital. We're going to meet with the service, local service providers as a next step. And then we're going to continue then the conversation even beyond that. So this is not the first part. We're not doing this just to necessarily appease you for, on a one-time basis. We're going to truly continue this dialogue, and we want to hear from you, and we want to rectify as many issues as we can as we move forward. With that being said, I don't know if Her Worship or MPP Clark has anything to say before we move on and close out the session.
I would like to give the last word, I think, to MPP Steve Clark. I see his face there now. So I just want to say, I think we are a very caring and compassionate community, and I really appreciate, I think, what are very well-considered questions on behalf of everyone. We recognize there are diverse views and perspectives, on the facility, and it's our job as council to really navigate this terrain as responsibly and responsively as possible. So I appreciate that this got everyone on the same page in terms of the ministry's thinking. And I know there's lots of hard work ahead, but it matters a great deal to us that we hear from a range of voices, no matter where you may sit in terms of how this will affect our community. And with that, I'll turn it over to MPP Steve Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And Daniel, I just want to thank you for the great job at facilitating today. Ali and all the team, I want to thank you for all the detailed information that you continue to provide. And thank you for acknowledging the work that myself, along with our tremendous council, has been able to do to get this community engagement piece brought forward much earlier in the process. And I thank you for acknowledging that. I think tonight's meeting was extremely comprehensive. It gave a lot of local voices the opportunity to put some concerns, some questions, some comments forward. And, I'm going to continue to, make sure that those local voices are heard throughout this process, regardless of a process that might have happened, in Brockville or Napanee or Windsor or Aurelia. The municipality of North Grenville is a very, passionate community that has very strong views about their municipal boundaries, what goes on there, how it affects their people. And I've said right from day one that, I believe this is a great community process that you're engaging with. I think there is a lot of benefits, and I would never recommend that we go down this road without having a positive outcome. And I think today's consultation really makes me feel great that we had this opportunity for local voices, and the fact that, again, it's not the only opportunity. So we'll continue to push the ministry to make sure that this community is reflected in whatever final decisions are made around the site. So thank you for such a comprehensive opportunity tonight.
Thanks for nearly 4 hours. We're at 8:49. So certainly not only were the 3 hours fulfilled, but you gave us some extra time. And just given what I think was at one point 280 people on the call, we appreciate you doing that and your team for staying with us for the dialogue.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.